if you follow the trends lately, and particularly in the West, and there seems to be a popular app which allows strangers to get together for social purposes. Now, again, looking back history until today, there's no denying that humans, we are social species. So in other words, we are hungry and desire for relationships. And of course, that if you live long enough, that we should understand that relationships are rather difficult. But based on the research that recently post the pandemic, that somehow more countries today are facing this population decline and let alone building up the families. And what happened to the traditional value today? And also, how do we understand this digital revolution and so link to the online dating world? I remember that if you ask friends around, I believe to say that only few and fewer people are interested in relationships and let alone trying on these digital platforms. Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about all of them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, and who is the Gina Potarca. Gina is a lecturer of the sociology at the University of Liverpool, and her research interests revolve around the application of digital, multilevel, and longitudinal method for the study of assortative mating and the social implication of the digital revolution and the mental health. Well, Gina, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here.
Well, Gina, again, such an honor to have you on the show, but I want to get started from this a fundamental question. Again, as we mentioned in the intro, the post-pandemic, and I believe the majority of us are realizing or start to wake up that loneliness has become one of the major issues that really causing depressions and, mental health issues and so forth. But meanwhile, people are still confused about relationships and particularly related to dating or, offline or online. So let's start with the first question. What is happening today, and why do you think people are still very much hesitant about getting into relationships, and eventually that could lead to something either beautiful or it could be something as a tragedy? Your thoughts?
Hey, relationships are hard. It is difficult, first of all, to find the right partner. It is difficult to sustain that partnership given multiple stressors that affect a relationship. We are now in the age of relationships where partners don't specialize as they used to in the past. There is, we don't follow the same rigid distribution of roles as we did in the past, where the woman would take up most of domestic work, even though women are still very much in charge of that, but they're still active they're also active in the labor market. So we're not following the same scripts as in the past, which makes relationships much more multidimensional and complicated. And we're also living in this global age where people often have to move for their jobs. So that can also add stressors to the relationships, or can make the process of starting a relationship or finding a partner complicated. So we live in complicated times with multiple things to juggle as individuals, which then makes it even more difficult to start and sustain a relationship with another individual with their own set of complications and stressors. Going back to that initial step of finding a partner, that has also become more challenging, because once again, we're moving away from those trusty networks of family and friends which operated as marriage markets or intermediaries. In the past, we're moving away from those social networks, and we have to take direct responsibility for the process of finding a partner, which is not necessarily easy. And then we also have to devote a lot of time to our professional life. Our jobs are getting busier and busier. Work life is infringing on private life, speaking of post-pandemic trends. So yeah, we have very little time, very limited access to offline marriage markets, which unfortunately makes online dating apps the most accessible way to find a partner. But of course, it is not a perfect way of going about this process, because it comes with its own challenges.
Gina, I know, again, before we taping the show, that I mentioned that you did a lot of extensive research in the nation of Japan and Germany. Before we get to that, but I do have one more question. Again, I agree with you 100% that relationships are difficult, and also relationships are hard, and especially when it comes to compromise, or when it comes to willing to sacrifice, etc. But one piece of reality that around me, again, I travel around the world and I talk to people, and also I have friends. It's rather difficult and also unfathomable to believe that when I ask people, say, hey, what are the reasons that for you to be single? And too often I get this quite common, or should we say air quote popular answer would be, it's just very difficult to find the right person. Well, again, Gina, you are the expert and you did a research, but again, help me with better understanding. Is this really one way to protect her, or to protect himself or herself from getting into something that unknown? Because it sounds to me it's a lame excuse to say, well, I'm not interested, because it's hard to believe. I always say, you live in a country with millions of people. At the end of the day, that the person really cannot find a right person. And also, how do we even define the right person today? I mean, what is happening to our understanding, and what is happening to this trend of being single and also being bold and being prideful? What's happening today, by the way, Gina?
I believe we live in an age where people are hyper individualized. So we are all interested in self-actualizing and pursuing the right kind of job, pursuing the right kind of leisure activities, things that enrich our lives. And once again, I think about the past and at how standardized our pathways through life used to be, which did not pose so much challenges to a relationship. So it's not only the fact that we individualize and we're always seeking ways to stimulate ourselves and enrich our lives. We also have to make sure that our partner is aligned to our needs. So we have to hyper individualize persons that are trying to make a relationship work, and that relationship is also something organic that grows over time. And yeah, that makes it very difficult to sustain. And then there are those added stressors that I mentioned, the fact that maybe a partner gets a job in a different country or in a different side of the world, and that again can add stressors to the relationship and make it unsustainable in the long term. So things have gotten very complicated in terms of our pathways and how non-linear they have become for all of us. I do think of my own example and the fact that I started out in Romania, my country of origin, and then I moved to the Netherlands, where I finished my studies, and I had to take a job in Switzerland, and now recently I had to take another job in the UK. So That's complicated. I have to restart building a social network every time, and yeah, it makes relationships unattainable.
Well, again, Gina, you said it. Now let's talk about your research in the nation of Germany and in Japan. Again, I am reading one of the amazing, should we say, research that you put out. It's called Online Dating. It's Shifting Educational Inequalities in Marriage Formation in Germany. Now, one thing that stood out for me, surprisingly, that you mentioned, and I quote, what remains unclear is how the link between education and the union formation varies in online versus offline meeting context, particularly on the backdrop of growing educational gaps in marriage. Gina, walk us through step by step. What is the relationship, particularly in the nation of Germany? What is the correlation or relationship between educational background and also the, I guess, the description or even the right person fitting the right box category? What is the relationship to that? And also, why are you interested in discovering this unique piece or this unique element of the research? Go ahead.
Going back to your previous question, I guess what makes relationships complicated, or what pushes people into long-term singlehood, is the fact that women have changed a lot. So women have been investing in their education, in their professional career much more than in the past. And a lot of women are unwilling to give up on all of those investments to simply transition into a housewifehood. And they're much more interested in finding a partner willing to share domestic work, willing to participate in family work. What I found in Germany, so in Germany, I started with the premise that highly educated women are less likely to get married because of the reasons that I've just mentioned. So they're investing in education. They're less willing to give up on that investment. So they're more likely to not get married. But when I looked at couples that emerged from online dating, I saw that it was actually the highly educated that were more likely to marry, to transition into marriage, than the lower educated. So this indicates that highly educated women that have made those investments in education, in acquiring human capital, developing their professional career, but who still want to also develop a partnership, who have not given up on the idea of having both, they potentially go into the online marriage market with the idea of finding a partner that is better suited for them, that would be more willing to participate in family work and domestic work. And that potentially leads to faster marriage for them. So for this particular category of women, online dating seems to work very well, because they're much more likely to find a partner that matches their needs, their preferences, and their values as well, their family values. So yeah, that was an encouraging finding to stumble upon, and it also happens because of structural reasons in the online marriage market. Because usually on dating apps, on dating websites, we have more men than women. So highly educated women take advantage of this structural leverage that they have. They have more bargaining power. So they're probably establishing relationships that are less traditional from the very beginning, and that dynamic, that disruption of traditional courtship in the online world reverberates throughout the whole relationship. So there's research done on couples who start out as more egalitarian, more progressive in their courtship dynamics, who are shown to preserve that that more egalitarian way of relating to each other throughout their whole relationship. So that's what my co-author and I presumed, or that's how we interpreted results for Germany. So I'm speaking of another paper where we saw that married couples who meet online tend to be more egalitarian in their division of housework than married couples who met in so-called offline spaces of interaction. And this happens because of the online environment, and because women have a little bit more assertive power, they're much more likely to demand for their preferences to be met. And then they also have that structural advantage where there are fewer women, there are more men, so they know they have more bargaining power, and so they're much more willing to ask for what they prefer and what they need. And that has an impact on the way the relationship is set up and on the way marriage and gender is manifested later on.
All right, Gina, let's continue our conversation. I want to talk about the nation of Japan. Also, I realized that you also did some research. And one thing that I want to remind our viewers that at the beginning of the intro, I mentioned that more countries today are facing this population decline. And also, of course, Japan is one of the countries that today, especially the Japanese government, is really worried and anxious about the population decline. Now, going back to the online dating topic, can you help us to understand what is happening to the online dating world in Japan? And also, I realize, research after research, that younger generations today are not very much interested in forming relationships and let alone getting married. So how do we understand the change and the shift in the nation of Japan among the younger generations, and also what are they particularly looking for when it comes to online dating? Your thoughts?
Yeah, Japan was a very interesting context to look at, and together with Professor Hiroshi Ishida from the University of Tokyo, we wanted to see whether or not the online marriage market aids Japanese people form relationships, and what kind of relationships are formed within this space. And Japan is interesting because research has shown that even among young people, marriage intentions are still strong. So people do want to get married, do see a lot of value in getting married. But we have, first of all, once again, the problem of highly educated women who, even in Japan, in the staunchly traditional context of Japan, they're less willing to give up on their investments to just be a housewife. And second of all, I think Japanese people have a hard time taking ownership of the partner selection process. So in the past, Japanese people were able to rely on the family, on the workplace, for finding a partner or for being paired up with potential partners. And now in this hyper-individualized age, they have to go about this process themselves, which can be a little bit terrifying in a country where I know social life is very much gender segregated. So people may not have the tools or the ease the lack of inhibition to interact with potential partners of the opposite sex. So yeah, people want to get married, but they're put off by the process of finding a partner. And if we speak of men, because I've mentioned women and the fact that they're less willing to sacrifice and become a housewife, men, on the other hand, are also experiencing some difficulties in terms of amassing the right economic status. So sustaining a job long term is not necessarily attainable anymore as it used to be in the past. There is much more precarity. A lot of men go back to living with their parents. So the resources, the economic resources that they bring to the marriage market are, let's say, less impressive, less solid than they used to be in the past. So that also probably leads to resistance towards getting married. But yeah, we wanted to see if online dating helps people bridge these gaps, whether or not it allows men and women to interact in a space where anonymity potentially generates a little bit more ease and interaction with the opposite sex. And where, once again, Japanese women could potentially leverage the fact that they are much more numerous in these spaces. They are less numerous, than men. So once again, there's probably that element, that advantage and that bargaining power that women can capitalize on in their interaction with men. And just like in Germany, we actually got a confirmation that in Japan as well, married couples that started out online are much more egalitarian in their division of housework than other couples. And this is a pattern that we see among highly educated women. So yeah, once again, for highly educated women who know how to operate in the online world, how to take advantage of its advantages. They do seem to form relationships that are a little bit more innovative, so to speak, in terms of gender. So once again, an encouraging finding when it comes to online dating, which is typically demonized as the space that produces a lot of fatigue and a lot of frustration, and that is real and that is valid as well. But it is also a space that allows for people to meet potential partners they wouldn't otherwise meet, or form relationships that they wouldn't otherwise form in real life. So I always try to send out this message that yes, there are many inconveniences with online dating, and one has to be discerning about the process of selecting a partner online. But there are also advantages and benefits to capitalize upon.
Well, Gina, I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the last question. Again, the point I'm trying to make is holiday, it's fast approaching. I mean, again, in the US next week, we celebrate Thanksgiving. And also, of course, in December, we have Christmas and New Year and etc. So what would you say to the people that who are still very positive and hopeful when it comes to seeking relationship, or when it comes to trying out online dating? So what would you like to tell them as encouragement, as they're still hesitant of trying, or hesitant of tapping into the world of digitalization? Can we see any changes, or do we still believe that online dating, not only in Germany or not only in Japan, are also around the world, that are still providing helpful guidance or helpful advice or even recommendations to the citizens around the world? And your final thoughts?
I would tell everyone considering this option to give it a try, but make sure that you go you go about this process with discernment. So I go back to that keyword of discernment, being aware of how frustrating the process can be, the fact that it requires investment in time and energy. There are different options to sift through. It's very important to be specific about what someone is looking for in a potential partner, and communicate that clearly, and make sure that you modulate your expectations. So online dating is just a tool, something that gives you access to a pool of potential partners, but once again, the work of selecting the right one, being discerning about who we engage with in interaction, and then the work of building a relationship with someone, that is all up to us. But yeah, give it a try, and be aware that there are many success stories about online dating, and a lot of encouraging findings, especially in my own research on the kinds of relationships that are formed.
Well, with that,
don't have sorry to interrupt. My final thought would be to not adopt a consumerist approach, because a lot of people may go about it with the idea of finding a partner and picking it up from the shelf. So that would be one of the dangers of online dating, going about this process with a consumerist approach of just accumulating as many matches as possible. So it's important to remember that we're still dealing with human beings.
Well, with that positive and encouraging notes, again, we understand that relationships are complicated. And of course, as Gina mentions over and over again, that it takes time and it takes effort, and most importantly, that it takes energy for all the partners and willing to commit and willing to, to dedicate themselves and for the sustainability. Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, it's such an honor to speak to Gina Potarca. Again, Gina, it's a lecturer of the sociology at the University of Liverpool. And I strongly encourage everyone to go online and check out Gina's research, and particularly about the online dating in the nation of Japan and in Germany. Well, Gina, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and we'd love to have you back on the show for future episodes as we continue to look at the complexity and also this appealing approach of online dating. So thank you so much for doing this.